Stewart here from Drone Film Guide, coming to you from the incomparable Glencoe here in the Scottish Highlands. Drink it in, it is the most beautiful place on earth, I would argue. Right, look at that behind me. It's the sun, it's very, very bright, pointed right at us. Looks absolutely gorgeous, but it's the perfect scenario where we might be tempted to take an HDR photo. High dynamic range. We want to capture all the detail in the sky there, which is very bright, and we want to capture the detail in the shadows, but we don't have HDR mode here on the Mavic Mini, which coincidentally is the drone that is filming me as we speak. You might have seen the shadow pass across my face. Using it as a handheld gimbal and vlogging camera. Pretty handy, wouldn't you say? So let's see if we can put it together manually, taking 3 or 4 different JPEGs with the Mavic Mini. Different exposures, some overexposed, some underexposed, and then we'll blend them together in Lightroom and see what we get. I love the principle of just doing more with the camera that we've got. Instead of making excuses going, oh, I can't take this scene, I can't do these photos because I don't have a Mavic 2 Pro, I've only got a Mavic Mini. Let's see what we can do. I'll just give you a quick demonstration of how bracketing works on a normal camera. We've got this tripoded here and we're going to take 7 different photos and then blend them all together in post. Let me show you. In this shot we've set an exposure right down the middle there. So we go into our settings, bracket, more settings, and you'll see there we're taking 7 photos with a step of 1 EV. So 0 in the middle there is the photo that I've set up. And then on either side we're going to get 3 photos brighter and darker than that photo that has been set up. It's those 7 photos that we will then take into Lightroom and composite, and that is what we are replicating by manually taking different JPEG photos with the Mavic Mini that we will then composite in Lightroom. Give it a little second and you'll see those 7 photos, there they go, in rapid fire being taken. You know, I think it's going to work great. I took a whole bunch of photos there on the Mini, all the way up to 1/8000th of a second shutter and all the way down to 1/50th of a second shutter. So we've got a whole range of exposures there that we will try and blend together in Lightroom. It's very calm today, so the Mavic Mini was static, so all those frames should be pretty similar, but you certainly want to do them as quickly as possible because at the end of the day the software has to merge hopefully identical photos. So if the drone is moving about or there's something moving in the scene, that's not going to make that merging process any easier. I'm feeling pretty good about this, so let's jump into Lightroom and see how we get on. In out the cold in the Drone Film Guide studio. Here we are in Lightroom. If you're at the beginning of your journey, you might not have access to Lightroom. You have to pay for this, a monthly subscription from Adobe. But in the fullness of time, you might upgrade to a piece of software like this. There are other options for creating HDR composites, but I'll take you through Lightroom because it is the industry standard on this kind of stuff. So we have 8 photos here. You can see the exposure increasing as we go through the 8 photos. What I've discovered is that we are ultimately dealing with JPEGs, not RAW files, so even though we're compositing them, there are still limitations. If you've never edited a RAW file before, you'll be amazed at the amount of detail retained in the shadows and highlights in a single photo, never mind when you do the composite. JPEGs, less so. A lot of information is thrown away during the compression process. So because of that, I'm going to leave the 1/8000th out of the equation here, and we'll start with this one. I'm going to take 4 photos. Let's take 4 photos. So we don't overcomplicate matters. We'll take these 4 photos. As you can see, I've selected them all the way from 1/4000th all the way up to 1/50th of a second shutter. Right click, photo merge, HDR. Let's see what kind of preview we get. Okay, now this is in fact the composite image. I like to leave auto settings off, but if you click that auto settings box on, you get an indication of the expected result. And look at that, it looks pretty great already. But I'll show you how to do that manually here. So let's merge those photos, give it a second, and we'll get our HDR composited photo, courtesy of Lightroom. There it is. Right, doesn't look so good, but let's edit this. Let's just pull up the exposure for starters. So we'll go to the exposure tab. There we go. Look at the amount of detail that we now get back in the shadows. We can't go too far because see, it still ruins the image. We're not dealing with raw photos here, but we can take it up a little bit. Now we have this blown out sky that we want to deal with. Classic technique here is just to pull this highlights tab all the way back down. You see it all the time. And it works at the end of the day. Highlight recovery in the sky essentially looks pretty smart. Pull the whites back a little bit. And it does end up giving you this slightly HDR look, but at the end of the day, it does give us the outcome that we're going for. By comparison, if you go to one of these shots here where the sky is blown out, let's take this one and we say, right, let's do this highlight recovery technique. Pull the highlights down, just doesn't work, doesn't look good at all. There's not enough information retained in that JPEG. Now that we're at this point, you can edit away to your heart's content. It's a good idea to not get too carried away when we're doing this. So some of the things that people do is pull that clarity slider all the way up to 100. Now personally, it's a guilty pleasure for me. I quite like it, but I know it's tasteless in photography. So you can pull that up a little bit. Let's pull it up to 40. I think that is actually an improvement in this case. Let's bring a little bit extra saturation in here. Again, we don't want to go all the way up to here. It's not very classy, but let's bring a little bit of vibrance into this. And I don't know, give or take, I'd say that's probably done. As I say, you can do as you wish from this point onwards. I'm just giving you a little taster here as to what you can do with your photos. But if we look at the before and after, that's the before and that's the after, and look at the flexibility that having that composited image gave us. Again, if we took one of the other photos, let's take this one as an example, there's no way that we can recover all those highlights. Look, let's see what we can do here. Well, that looks horrendous. And then you could try and add some clarity here and some vibrance. Oh, it's just awful because it's a JPEG and because we're pointed right at the sun there. If you were shooting RAW, you'd have more flexibility. And if you're getting serious about your aerial photography, you're probably going to want to upgrade at some point to a drone that has RAW shooting capability. It's just night and day. But at the end of the day, as I said in the introduction to this video, I love the concept of doing more with what we've got, not making excuses and saying, oh, I can't do this because I don't have a £5,000 camera. We've never owned a £5,000 camera. There's always limitations. Until you're at the top end of Hollywood, you're not going to have access to the best equipment, and it forces you to learn how to use it. And I think that is a very valuable discipline for all of us. One last look at the final result. I like it. I think it's pretty good. Anyway, lots more content coming soon here on Drone Film Guide. We will see you next time.